to join this event. First, please adjust your name or ID screen using the given format. Second, during the event, please turn off your audio and only turn it on when the moderator gives you the change. Third, please turn on your camera. Fourth, please ensure your network has a stable connection. Fifth, please adjust the seat position comfortably and prevent the backlight effect. I will also read out the important information for today. First, please fill in the attendance form on this link bit.ly/attendance_R2SEP 2021, and the link will be closed in 15 minutes. Second, fill in the feedback form that will be shared 15 minutes before the session ends and will be closed after 1 hour. Third, attendance and feedback is compulsory for these purposes. First, for mandatory attendance for ITS Masters and Doctoral students new intake. Second, for the certificate of participation, which is eligible for international participants who have 60% attendance, which is minimum 5 meetings. Third, for the STEM for it, that would be eligible for ITS undergraduate students. So welcome to Researcher and Research Student Enrichment session on today, Thursday, the 7th of October 2021. I am Intan from ITS Global Engagement, and today I will be your Master of Ceremony for this session of R2SEP. You are now participating in the soft engineering stream of R2SEP, so please do not forget to fill your attendance at the link that has been sent by our committee via the Zoom chat box, and the link will be closed in 15 minutes from now on. Participants who wish to ask questions during the Q&A session, please send your question at the link that will also be sent by our committee via the Zoom chat box. Alternatively, you may raise your hand during the Q&A session to ask your question directly. So before we start our agenda, allow me to deliver our schedule today as follows. First will be the opening by MC. Second, introduction to the moderator and speaker. Third, the lecture session. Fourth, the Q&A session. Fifth, the certificate awarding. And sixth, closing of this R2SEP session. So before we move on to the next agenda, please allow me to elaborate about today's lecture. Today's lecture in the soft engineering stream of R2SEP is titled Literature Review, Latest Tools and Methods, which will be delivered by our speaker, Dr. Tiang Ho Lim from University Technology Brunei, and Burani P. Kusumawardani from ITS Surabaya. They will be the one conducting today's session as our moderator. Next, let me introduce our moderator for today. So, our moderator today, Burani P. Kusumawardani, is a lecturer and researcher in Information System Department at ITS. She finished her master's degree in Informatics Institut Teknologi Bandung and her bachelor degree in Electrical Engineering at Institut Teknologi Bandung as well. She is interested in some research fields which are artificial intelligence, machine learning, and natural language processing, or computational linguistics. Now that you are informed about our moderator, without any further ado, let's proceed to the main agenda. To Burani, as our moderator, the time is yours.
Yes, thank you, Mbak Intan, as the moderator. So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen of the audience. It is an honor for me to introduce our speaker for this session of Researcher and Research Student Enrichment Program, R2SEP, Fall 2021, Dr. Lim Tiong Ho. Dr. Lim is an assistant professor at the University of Technology Brunei with research interest in artificial intelligence, wireless sensor, network routing protocol, and artificial immune systems. Besides that, he also holds the position as the Director of Planning and Development at University Technology Brunei. Dr. Lim obtained his PhD degree in computer science from the University of York and his MSc in engineering in telematics from the University of Sheffield and Bachelor of Science in the computer science from the University of Kiel, all three from in the United Kingdom. He was a US Asian Fulbright visiting scholar in the period of 2015 to 2016 at the University of Virginia in the United States. Dear members of the audience, an essential part of a postgraduate journey and the career of a researcher in general is knowing how to find a research idea and planning its execution. and literature review is very important for that purpose. However, today we are inundated with the amount of scientific literature available to us. Therefore, it is important that we know how to deploy the latest tools and methods to assist us in managing the literature that might be relevant to us. So in this afternoon session, we have the pleasure of learning from Dr. Lim on this theme. First, he will deliver his presentation for 60 minutes, and then we will be having a Q&A session for 30 minutes. A link will be provided at the chat for you to ask your question. So without further ado, I'm handing over the session to Dr. Lim. Hello, Dr. Lim.
Yeah, thank you very much for such a. Thank you for the introductions. So I'm going to share my screen for let's wait for a while. Can you see my screen now? Yes, I assume you can see my screen. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm going to present my lecture today, which is basically on literature reviews, lectures, tools, and methods. So as you know that doing a literature review is part of your studies, whether you're undergraduate students or postgraduate students. I think most of us actually do a bit of literature review. So what is important here, because you know that there's a lot of different ways you can do literature review. So, and the most important things when you do literature reviews, the product that you produce has to be should be transparent, okay? And people should be able to reproduce what you have produced. I mean, just like research, literature review is also the same thing. You read a paper, the paper should be accessible by people as well, not like something that you hide inside it, okay? And also you need to plan it properly, and also serve a purpose. So the objective of today's talk, hopefully by the end of today, you should be able to understand the purpose and basic requirement for a literature review, okay? And then we'll develop a strategies for inventing, organizing, and drafting a literature review. Okay? Because when you develop strategies, you definitely need to understand the tools as well. So we'll be covering some of the relevant tools that you can use while you're trying to produce your literature review itself. So what are the purpose of literature review? So if you think about it, there's different type of literature review. Okay, there's also different numbers of sources that you need to produce your literature review, and it varies depending on the purpose of your literature review, and also the level of where you study. Okay, therefore you have to know very well the purpose and the type of literature review that you'll be conducting. Okay, generally a literature review usually consists of the following sources. It can be a scholarly writing. Basically, you're trying to write something for publications, where you want to peer review like you want someone to do a review on your paper. Or the other one is just purely producing studies. Okay, so if I ask you a questions that are saying that, okay, what is the purpose of literature review? So if you can quickly put in on the chat, see whether whatever you think the purpose of a literature review is correct or not, what I'm going to cover in the next 1 hour or so. Okay, so I know a lot of you have done literature review, but you do a literature review for a certain reason. Okay, so we're going to cover some of the reasons here first. So one of the first few reasons that you're going to do your literature review is because first you want to establish your research context. Okay, how else will you define exactly what you're trying to look for and where its limits are? Okay, so basically you're trying to identify where exactly it is. You also, and then the other reason why you might want to produce a literature review is because you want to present a survey of proceeding of literatures. on a particular topic that you might be interested in. Okay, and these purposes is more like you're trying to identify how else will you know what have been done lately. So what you want to understand what people have been doing. So you might want to do a survey, okay, on a particular topic that you're interested in. Okay, and then the other reason why you want to do a literature review is because you want to explore methods of solving similar problems that you have. So because you know you have a particular problems, for example, you're trying to develop a AI, you're trying to define an AI algorithms to solve the spreading of COVID-19. I mean, to detect COVID-19. Okay, so it's just like, okay, so how can we actually identify the antibodies using AI? So you might want to explore methods instead of, I mean, you might want to go do some literature review and see how other people have used AI to detect antibodies in different diseases, for example. Okay, so that way you can actually identify, or you can actually select an appropriate methods for your research. Okay, or the other purpose is actually you're trying to outline some relationship. You want to determine a relationship between one paper with another paper, and you want to identify whether is there any differences between those two papers. Is there any debates that you can have? Okay, and also sometimes you want to evaluate the qualities and the relevance of a literature. So sometimes you might want to see how good that paper, I mean, how good the research area in this particular, from a particular literature. So you can actually identify, is there something that you can build on or something that you can actually reject? In other words, not trying to find someone for errors, because when you do a literature review, you're not actually trying to criticize them. You're actually trying to see whether their research is sound or not. Okay. And then one of the most common reason for doing a research, I think most of you will be saying, will be trying to identify gaps, trying to identify any inadequacy, okay, so that you can actually identify a new contribution area for research. Okay, so you read to try to identify new ideas, especially if you're doing a trying to how good is research, how good is your writing. Okay, how else can I have faith in my writing? Okay, so you have shown that in your literature review to do that. So there are different types of literature review that you can do. Okay, I mean, not different type. I mean, it's that there's a different reason why you want to do a literature review. You can actually do a literature review because of a course assignment. Okay, so when you do a literature review in a course assignment, usually you try to show how much you know, what other has discovered on the topic. Okay, and how you do it is actually try to analyze and evaluate the literature that you read. The other one is more like a chapter length review of the literature included in your dissertation. So it's like when you write this one is more related to research students. Okay, so for of course assignment, I'm more saying that it's most probably related to undergraduates, because you're trying to, as undergraduates, you're trying to show that, okay, I'm going to do these experiments and this is what other people have been doing. Okay, but when you do a chapter length review, you're trying to do a literature review so that you can actually say, this is the things that people are doing, and there's a need to do my research. Okay, so the purpose of a chapter length review is actually trying to establish a foundation for your own research topic, and to show that your own research is in a particular context of which or what is known about the particular subject. Okay. The other purpose is maybe you want to produce a short review papers. I mean, I think most of you will do research. Usually, you like to read review papers. Okay. So usually, a short review papers you write at the beginning of your research, where you want to publish an article, so that you can give your reader sufficient backgrounds and context of understanding of your work. Okay. And then also you might want to have a stand-alone review articles to give your reader more comprehensive survey of a major researchers and discovery. Okay. And the last thing that you do a literature review is because you want to write a proposal. Okay. So what is a literature review all about? Actually, literature review is basically a critical analysis of existing research in a particular field. Okay. It actually allows you to gain critical understanding of the area that you're going to discover, you're going to do a study on. So it actually highlights both the strengths and weaknesses of existing work. Okay. And also it's opportunity, you also give you opportunity to think about what has been done in the field. Okay, this is quite important, especially you're trying to do a PhD, because in PhD, discovering of new knowledge is very important. Okay, so the only way you can know that you have discovered new knowledge is you have do a thorough search in your literature review, and there's no one in that I mean, I'm not going to say in that field, but if no one have actually published what you're trying to do. Okay, and also an opportunity to give you to think about the similarities, the patterns, the trends, and also the differences between existing research. Okay, so by doing that, you can actually highlight also the strengths and weaknesses. When you highlight the strengths and weaknesses, you can actually think about what has not been done or what need to be done. Okay, so when you know there's a weaknesses, yeah, you can sort of identify, yeah, there's an area that I can look into here because there's weaknesses in this particular research area. Okay, but you know, oh, there's a strength there's a strength in this area, but it doesn't mean that you cannot do it, but you might be a way to actually improve it as well. Okay, so the last one is actually, and the last one is trying to identify gap in the literature so that you can justify, give a reason why your research is needed. Okay, so literature review actually is a way to actually provide evidence for your work, evidence for your design. When I mean evidence for your design, is evidence for why you're taking that methods, why you're using this parameters, why are you using this test approach. Okay, so you think about when you want to do experiments, you usually need to select your tools, and using literature review will be able to allow you to identify, yeah, I'm using this tool because these tools can allow me to change the variables that I want to do in my research. Okay, so what are the steps to do to conduct a literature review? So usually you need to plan first. Okay, before you do a literature review, you need to start planning. You need to do your planning. You need to do after that, then you can start doing your reading and your research. Okay, i.e. you're trying to search everywhere and try to do something readings and try to understand. And then once you find all the paper that is relevant, then you start analyzing. Okay, so you have to start analyzing, then you can start when you're analyzing, you try to group the paper accordingly. And then after that, you can start write your literature reviews and you start revising your. And then after you finish drafting, you can revise your paper again. Your literature review again. Okay. So when you do your planning, sometimes you will need to formulate. The purpose of planning, okay, is actually you're trying to formulate the focus questions that you're trying to look into. Okay. Also, the planning is actually help you to organize the search terms. Okay. And also, the planning will help you to choose a relevant article for the research area itself. So if you think about it, literature review, it's more than just a thesis or it's more than just a paper or a thesis itself. Literature is basically literature review is a process as well as an outcome. Okay, so literature review, when you look at it as an outcome, because what happened is actually produce a product. Okay, it appears in the final draft of your thesis, as part of your introductions, or as a separate chapters, or even as part of your content of your experiments. Okay, so in other words, literature review is everywhere. Okay, it is also literature review can view as a process because it actually allows you to critically engage. Okay, engage in thinking, engage in reading, engage in writing with relevant research on your topic. Okay. So you keep on thinking, when you do a literature review, you keep on thinking, and then keep on reading, and then you keep on writing, because all these three processes is important. So it is crucial that it is a crucial and formative stage of your research or your PhD thesis. Okay. So literature review is critical. It's a critical look at existing literature that is significant to the work that you are carrying out. So what it does is actually sometimes literature review actually do provide a background information. Okay, you do a literature review because you want to identify some background information. You want to establish some importance. Okay, you want to demonstrate some familiarity. Okay, and you want to identify area for further research. Okay, the reason why sometimes you want to ask me, like, why do I need to demonstrate familiarity, is that because as I said earlier, when you do a research, or especially a PhD, you're trying to identify gaps. But why I want to demonstrate familiarity? One of the good reasons why you want to show that there's a familiarity between your work and other people's work is because you can actually demonstrate the importance of it. People are looking into it, you know that there's an importance in that area and there's a needs to do the research. Okay, which means actually it helps you to identify the needs or justifications of why your research is also important. Okay, so demonstrate familiarization is actually quite good in a way, but because a lot of people have been doing a lot of similar research in that area, which means it might be difficult for you to identify gaps. Okay, so once you have identified we actually just talk about the literature review. So next things what you need to do is how you can plan for your literature review. Okay, planning. So when you start planning, you need to be focused. Okay, i.e. you need to sort and categorize the information. Okay, and also estimate the irrelevant information. So another, you need to identify what is the specific thesis, problem, or research questions that your literature review will help you to define. Okay, and also identify a focus that allow you to sort and categorize the information. Okay, and eliminate any irrelevant information, because when you know that when you do a literature research, you're going to find a lot of information, and it is important that you sort the information out, eliminate some of the irrelevant one. Okay? And then the next things that you want is actually you need to identify the type of literature review that you're going to do, whether it's a theory LR to look for theory, or to look for methods, or to look for policy, or to look at some quantitative type of a paper, or a qualitative type of papers. Okay, because that way, if you can identify the types, it will actually allow you to be more focused in it. Okay, and then the next thing is the scope. So you might want to identify what are the scope of your literature review, identifying the boundary. Okay, where should you stop? How far should you stop? If you know that when you do a literature review, actually the way that you especially when you do a PhD, is actually is a funnel. Okay, you start off with small, and then you go to big, and then you suddenly go back small again. So when you go to big, you need to identify where are the boundaries that you need to stop when you do your literature review. Okay, and also what type of sources that you should be using. Okay, another, where should you find your information? Where should you get your literature from? Okay, and the last one is the academic disciplines. So academic disciplines here, you're actually trying to identify the specialized area that you want to look into. Okay, because especially in computing, soft computing, when you try to do a literature review, you realize that the information spread can be very huge, especially when you search for AI. And you know that the AI algorithm, there's multiple different type of algorithms, but you need to identify, when you do literature review, yeah, it's good. You can actually identify all the algorithms, but you need to filter off and be very focused and identify which of the paper is relevant to the problem that you're trying to solve, because not all the AI algorithm is relevant to your research area. Okay. So when you do scoping, where are the different areas that you can do your scoping from? Okay. You can actually try to look for background sources. So background, actually, the first thing you want to do is when you want to get some background information, you usually go to books, because books, usually the informations are stagnant. Okay, so you only go to books when you want to look for a concrete theory, okay, or definitions. So which means that there's the only time that you can actually look for articles, or even articles. Okay, you can also look for articles that is actually dated long time ago, because this as you only look for article that's in literature review, literature that is only dated for a long time ago, when you want to look for theory and background sources. Okay, especially the first original paper that you're interested in, that actually produce that definitions. Okay, there is also a few of there's also you might also find some gray literature. Okay, and then you might also do some cited referencing search, and also use on the reference list. So sometimes when you start to do your literature review, you know that, okay, you go look for books for some background information, then you go to articles for the latest information. Then you might want to look for some gray area of your research. Okay, that's where the gray literature is. And then you might want to go through the cited reference as well within your text. Okay, and then the last one, you can go through your references. So you realize that there's a lot of ways that you can actually get your sources from. Okay, so but which means that the more sources you have, the more information you're going to have. So you need to find a way to actually you need to decide how far should you look for. Okay. So because people can keep on looking for richer review and just keep on finding papers, but you need to know when to stop. Okay. So the first, how you know where to stop is the first thing is trying to understand your research area. Okay, and how you understand the research area is basically through the process of reading. So there's a different level of critical review that you do. Okay, as I said earlier, undergraduates usually you do it because you want to back up some points. Okay, you want to back up the experiments that you do. So people will ask you why you use this approach. Oh, because it has been used by these people. Okay, and why you designed it this way? Because people designed it that way. Why you use these test methods? Because it has been used by this group of people to test their experiment as well, which is similar to my experiments. Okay. And then for master level, you do literature review because you're trying to understand and try to create some knowledge. Okay, so which means it's quite different from PhDs. PhD actually trying to create new and original knowledge, but master level you're trying to identify some knowledge. Okay, and you do that through a literature review. And then the last one is even us professional, we still do professional critical review, because what happens, we want to publish some papers, we want to publish in peer review papers and so on. So we also do reviews. So there's different type of level of critical review. So how do you usually do critical review? When you start reading, you can actually apply the Bloom's taxonomies, because what happens is, if you start off, when you start reading the papers, you're actually trying to understand some facts. Okay, so a typical Bloom's taxonomy actually here is actually known as remembering, but in terms of research context, the remembering is actually become knowledge. So the first thing you're trying to do here is actually, based on the Bloom's taxonomy, is trying to identify knowledge. Okay, so you identify knowledge, then you try to understand the knowledge. Okay, then you can apply it to the research area that you are trying to do it. Okay, see whether it's relevant or not, and then you can analyze. Okay, and then you can start evaluating the literature that you find, whether it is good or not. Okay, you're evaluating whether there's any gaps. You evaluate the papers, whether there's what is the strength and weaknesses, and so on. And then from that, you can actually create a new knowledge, okay, or new research directions. So basically, what you do, you start with the knowledge, you get the understanding of the knowledge, you try to apply it okay, use the informations in the same area that you're trying to solve it. Is it relevant or not? Okay, and then you analyze it and try to identify the relationships, and then identify the gaps, and then create the new knowledge. Okay. So when you do your reading, okay, you need to be critical when you do your reading. So usually what you do, the first thing that you look at the papers is trying to identify the research aims. What are the purpose? Okay, what are the aims of the papers, or what are the aims of the books? And then after that, you see whether the result have actually achieved the aims or not. Okay, if so, then you might want to see how they do it. Okay, and then after that, you want to identify also, are there any problems with their methodology? Is there any limitations? Okay, if no limitations, which is good. You know why? Because what happens is, there's no limitation, which means that, okay, their methods can be used in your bed. You can actually adopt their methods as well. But if there's a problem, then you can actually say, okay, there's a problem with their methods. Can I come up with new methods to address their issues? Okay, so that's why when you do your literature review, you not just read because you're trying to identify or highlight their weaknesses, but you can also identify their strength. Okay, so you want to see whether one of the things that you want to do is actually you want to identify whether the paper or the research approach is strong or weak. Okay, whether the model they use is strong or weak. And then the next, once you identify all this, then you see, okay, does this paper or does this research work or this paper actually helps you with your research work? If it is, then you need to start to put it aside. Okay, and then you can start writing on that paper and say what is your finding, not their finding, your finding on that paper, i.e., why it is important, why is it useful with your research. Okay. And then if you identify the weaknesses, then you can sort of come up with, say, maybe they can avoid doing this. Maybe they can use another approach. Okay. And then another approach will help you to identify how you can do it differently. Okay. So this two is usually you can actually use it to, I mean, when you identify it in your paper, this can be one of the new things that you can discover at a later stage. But when you read, usually you try to read both the strengths and weaknesses, okay, and also identify if the paper is good or not, okay. So by doing that, you can actually see whether the paper is, you can actually find the paper is good or not. And then once besides, when you do a literature review, you need to also think critically, okay. What critical thinking means in terms of literature review is you're trying to understand the research on its own terms, okay, i.e. you want to test whether it is viability or not, the research. You want to see whether the understanding of research in relationship to other arguments, okay. And then you also want to criticize the research in relation to what you want to do, okay, i.e. identify both the strength and weaknesses. Okay, so when you start to, after you reading, then you need to do a bit of thinking. Especially if you find the paper very, I mean, the literature itself is relevant to your work. Okay, so okay, as I said, you can search a lot of different kind of papers, but most important thing there, whatever papers that you found, whatever literature that you found, whatever research work that you found, you need to make sure that the sources that you obtain it from is credible. Okay, no point you cite it in your work and yet the sources are not reliable. Okay, so that's one of the most important things. So when you try to analyze the credibility of your paper itself, you need to make sure that is the information reliable? Is the information error-free? Is the information based on a proven facts? Okay, or can the information be verified against other sources? So you need to check the accuracy of the papers. I mean, the information that is actually provided in the paper. And then the other thing you might want to be interested in is to see who are the authors as well. This is important because you might want to find, because different authors will be able to publish differently. Okay, so you might want to look for, is there a good professor inside as part of the authors in the paper? Does he actually has the qualifications to speak or write on that topic, whether he's an expert in that area or not? Okay, is that authors actually affiliated with a reputable university and also very expert in this subject field? Okay, so that's one of the ways you can actually identify whether the paper that you're reading is actually a good paper or not. Okay, the next thing is the objectivities. So when you talk about objectivities, it's actually trying to identify the purpose of the informations. Whether the information is a fact or it's just an opinion. Okay, it's important you identify that. Sometimes an author can just write saying that based on their own opinion and there's no supporting evidence. Okay, so you need to be very critical in reading the papers. And then also is the information or the result produced biased or not. Okay, you have to be, so this is sort of things that when you read your papers, you need to look into it as well. Okay. And then the other thing is currency, not currency into money, but it's more like how current the information has been published. Is it the latest information? When is it published? Okay, as I say, if you're trying to look for theory, you're trying to look for background information, you can go to any date. I mean, the date, the publication date of the paper is not important. But if you're trying to look for new theory or new methods, you might also try, you need to look for the most recent one. Okay, the most recent articles, because maybe the most recent article has override the theory or the methods that has been proposed 10 years ago. Okay, someone might have come up with good methods in 10 years ago, but 10 years later, someone will come up with new research saying that, okay, the method they use is got a loophole, okay, got the problems. They should have used this approach. Okay, so it all depends what are you trying to look for. Einstein theory, yeah, it goes to Einstein. But any other theory, you must also try. I mean, other methods in AI, like deep learning. You know, deep learning people have been using different algorithms. So you might want to look for the latest approach, especially if they use TensorFlow or whatever the tools that you use. Okay. So, and then the last one is the coverage. Okay. So when you talk about coverage, you want to see whether the information actually covers. Okay, does the information cover meet your information, what you need? Okay. And then once you have identified all the good, credible all the credibility, once you analyze the credibility of the sources, then you need to select only relevant book and articles from your numbers of papers that you have found. Okay. So this is usually quite important, especially you're doing a PhD. This is where people will question you during your Viva. Okay. Why? The why questions will come up here. Okay, because when you know that, if those who have attended my presentation last semester, I've actually highlighted that when you do research, there are 3 things that you need to do. First is identify the what it is, how it is, and why it is. Okay, if you do research, you answer these 3 questions based on the work that you're doing, then you'll be able to answer any questions that are posed to you during the Viva. So how can you start how should you start doing your research? Where can you start? How can you start? So as I say, you need to identify who are the key players in your field, in the field that you're going to look at. Okay, as I say, you want to look for one of the authorities. So you want to identify who are the key area. So the key area could be academics, even industry, or even governing bodies. Depends what sort of research you're trying to do it. What sort of research area do you look at? And then after that, you want to identify what are the main ideas or debates in your field. Okay, you want to identify, see whether what are the hot topic now. Okay, what are the sort of things people are talking about now. Okay. And then you want to identify also to see and when you read the papers, you want to identify how does this area have changed over time. Okay, and then what are the sort of problems with these ideas and debates. So you can actually identify, oh, there's a lot of commonality people trying to solve here. Okay, this is sort of problems that they're trying to identify, and this is sort of problem that they found as well. Okay, so for example, it also helps you to identify, is there a problem with your methodology? So once you identify that, again, this is more detailed than previously. You can actually come up with the idea saying, okay, if I'm given the chance to do what they have done, how and what and how am I going to do it? Okay, how am I going to do it differently? Okay, because what happens is no point you reinvent the wheel. The most important thing when you do research, you don't want to reinvent the wheel. Okay, of course you tell me that, but I need to test out the experiment first. Yeah, true. You can test out the experiments, then you try to change the experiment, see whether you can improve the approach, especially if they have a good idea. If they are good, if their researchers have there's the strength when you identify there's a very advantage in their research. But when the limitations, then you might as well try to identify the gaps and try to solve the problem that you're trying to that you found in your literature. Okay. So where to start? So now you know how to start. So now you identify where to start. So again, I keep on highlighting, be selective. Okay, because when you do a Google search, you find that there's a lot of papers, and students always come to me and say, I read this paper. I said it's not relevant. Find other papers. Okay, so you need to be selective. So you can tell me now, then how can I be selective? There's so many papers on the internet. Well, you don't have to read every single text. Okay, you start off by quickly read the abstracts. Okay, you don't have to read every single word as well. So in other words, when you read the abstracts, I don't going to read every single lines it is. I'm just going to quickly look for keywords. Okay, so example, like I'm going to solve a problem using AI, using I don't want to say AI, I'm going to say deep learning. Okay, convolutional neural networks on robotics. So I'm going to scan for keywords: convolutional neural networks, robotics. Okay, something like optimizations. Okay, and then you can start reading. You read your abstract, you read your introductions, then you quickly think, oh, this paper is useful. So you quickly read every single page of it, but you don't have to understand everything. Okay, why? Because sometimes what you're interested is only a small chunk of the papers, maybe the methods, maybe their design approach. Okay, so you don't have to actually read everything as well. So be selective on what you're reading, what paper you're taking from. Be selective with your paper, and be selective on what you're reading, i.e. what you're trying to find. Okay, so that's how you do it. And then once you identify this paper is really useful, then you can start go into details of that paper. Okay? So once you know how to start, then you can actually start think of. You need to identify what is your main ideas or debates. Okay, you can start thinking of what are the key ideas, What are the debates? Okay, what are the methodology that you can actually found in your field? Okay, so you need to ask yourself, okay, when you try to do that, when you try to debate find your ideas and debates, you need to ask yourself, has the topic or problem be defined? Okay, is there actually a problem in the area that you're trying to solve here? Okay, is there any trend or patterns across the literature? Okay, is there any assumptions or approach that is made on the literature? And then is there any commonality between the papers? Okay, so this is with these few questions that you're trying to answer here, we'll be able to help you to come up with your new ideas or the reviews or critical reviews that you're trying to write. Okay, so you actually, when you read, you're trying to identify these 4 points here. Okay, what are the topic? Okay, what are the problems? What are the trends? What are the methods they use? What are the assumptions they use? Okay, and is there any similarity between different people? Okay. So once you have come up with your main ideas, then we need to start organizing your material. Okay, you need to, because you know that you have multiple papers. So what you need to do, you need to organize the paper properly. Okay, you need to organize the material to identify a debate. Okay, so you need to see whether any disagreement between the researcher A and researcher B, or is there any agreement between? Sorry. Is there any agreement between the researcher and researcher B? Okay. And then once you find out, is there some conclusion that you can build on? Okay. Or is there not your research, even is there a conclusion that is built from researcher A to researcher B? Why is this important? Is because researcher A might come up with the methods. Okay. Researcher A might come up with methods, but researcher B identified issue with researcher A. Okay, so basically the work of researcher B is based on researcher A. Okay, of course they have agreement between each other, but there's also disagreement, but researcher B trying to solve it through the work based on researcher A. Okay, this is quite common. Okay, maybe the researcher A and researcher B can be the same authors, but with a different group of researchers. Okay. And then sometimes you might also want to verify whether researcher B actually verified the researcher works of A. Okay, so sometimes it's quite important to see, is there any relationship between these two papers, whether each paper actually verify each other works, and then also any reservations about the works. So why you're doing this is because at the end of the day, you can actually use these two papers together and form a paragraph in your literature reviews on a particular topic that you're trying to look into. Okay, because you know that method A is used by A, method B is used by B. Okay, method B has actually improved method A. Okay, because it's trying to address the issue. But you might have come up with methods that actually say, okay, method A is good, but there's an issue method B have identified. But however, you identify another issues between those two researchers that you can actually highlight in your literature review. Okay. So it's quite important you organize that way. What happens when you organize that way? You know that next time when you write your final work, okay, when you write your final thesis itself, when you even write your thesis, you can actually say, okay, I read this somewhere. Where is it? Oh, it's actually I found this paper in researcher B. And oh yeah, it's actually linked with researcher A as well. So you can actually group everything together. So it's quite important that you organize your literature properly. Yeah? So we are talking about searching for papers. So where can you search your papers? So this is the first tool that you usually use. I think most of you know where to search for papers. Okay. So usually you do the first place you go is go to your university library. Okay. Your library should have a lot of information, books, printed papers of journals. Okay. That's my time, right? During my time, there's no good Google search or even online database. So we have to read actual papers. Okay? That was long time ago. It's hard work. Okay, so I end up having a big pile of at least a big pile of papers for my undergraduates, not my PhD, for my undergraduates. That's during long time ago. And then the other way, I mean, currently now the most common methods now, you do a web search. I think undergraduate students like to do that. go to Google, just type the topic of the project that I'm going to do, and yeah, I found a lot of work. And I'll say, okay, you give me a lot of rubbish here, because web search, when you give it to you, you sort it according to popularity. Okay, so usually the first finding on your search, especially on Google search, usually when you give it to you, might be the worst information that you can get. Because what happens, people might be finding, it might be the information that people are very popular with, so it might not be a very concrete information. So Google search is good, but you have to be careful with what you're trying to search. So when you're trying to search, you need to formulate your search methods, okay? Which is the second part later. And then the other one is you use Google Scholar. As I said, Google Scholar is a lot better, because what I mean, Google Scholar will give you more precise research paper. When you do a Google search, it will give you general information, which can be the worst information that you can get, and you can end up go into a sea of informations, which will make you lost in the search. And the last one is go to publisher search. So publisher search, we're talking about the Web of Science, the Scopus, IEEE Explorer. Of course, each of these websites you need to subscribe to, okay? So there's no free way of getting it, although students manage to find those illegal way of downloading the papers, okay? I'm not going to mention how, but I think most of you know how to do it. And then once you have, especially when you use Google search, the most important thing when you search for your documents, you might want to formulate your results. What happens is when you search, you usually have a lot of multiple results. So you might want to end up using a keyword search. Okay, you might want to do a search. You might want to employ a search strategy that can actually help you to articulate your research topics and your research questions. Okay, so you might want to do a keyword search so that you can save time, because usually time is against you. Okay, especially when you do your PhD, you want to make sure that you can publish as quickly as possible. So you need to do a smart search, use a keyword search, use a Boolean operator search. Okay, i.e. you combine your multiple search terms and use Boolean operations. For example, I'll say CNN and optimizations in robotics. Okay, for example. And then once you have found a good paper, then you can actually build on what you have found. Okay, what happens is how you build on what you have found, you might want to identify books that are covering the similar subject. So obviously books, you don't want to find too many, because what happens, once you find a good book, you work from that book. Okay, and then after that, you can start look for papers. So you can actually find more relevant resources based on what you have found. Okay, so after finding something relevant, you can actually continue your search and get more relevant sources. Okay, in fact, every relevant books, journals, or articles or database record is basically introductions to the new information to you. Okay, so you might want to go to the relevance resources from a database. You know that when you search for a database, usually now even like those I think Elsevier, or Science Direct actually have a capability to show you all the documents that are relevant to the area that you have been searching on. Okay, that's one way to keep track of, to identify the papers. And another way of methods that I usually use, and most students usually use, is actually trying to find resources from bibliography or even references of the papers. Because what I'm saying, I always use this because when you read a good papers, you know, oh, this paper is good, and they actually reference the previous paper. So you might want to look at the previous papers. Is it really good or not? Okay, but you don't go down to, after you find the previous papers, you don't go further down. You know why? Because what you're going to do end up is going to do a reference of a reference and a reference and a reference, and that is not a good way of doing research. Okay, so I would say if you want, you can reference back, you can cross-reference to the original publications. Okay, unless from the original publication is also based on another work, then you might want to go to the next level, or else you stop at the next level of referencing. And the last one, the most important thing is actually to keep track. Okay, you might want to keep a logbook of identifying the resources when you have searched, what are the readings that you have done. Okay, and this is important as well. And you realize that there's tools for you to do this as well, which I'm not going to cover here. And now I'll talk about it later when you talk about citations. So once you have identified all the papers, now it's time to prepare for your storybooks. Okay, so the first thing you usually do is create a mind maps. Okay, So usually in the mind maps, you usually have a lot of inputs. Okay. The inputs can be the topic, the key players, i.e. the key authors, the key resources, the ideas, the methodology, the strengths and weaknesses. So you draw all the inputs. And then after that, you can produce some outputs that actually will help you to identify the contributions. Okay. So when you map your story itself using mind maps, what you're trying to do here, you're trying to identify what are the topics that you're trying to do. Okay. Well, and then once you identify the topics, the fields, okay, the methodology, and the strengths and weaknesses, then you can think about what is your contributions be and how it is different from other people. So you can actually draw mind maps. This mind map is good because it also helps you to identify which area you haven't looked into it yet. Okay. So when you do your mind maps, you need to think about, you need to organize your review first. How are you going to organize what are you going to put in your mind maps? Okay. So sometimes when you want to organize your information, you might want to base on time. Okay, as I say, your researcher, which is the latest document, which is the last document, which is the oldest documents. Okay. Or you might want to organize it based on thematics. Okay, different themes, or different areas, or even discussion based, or even the combinations of all of it. So in practical, usually you might actually pick at least 3. And if you ask me, I'll say you want to find papers, the oldest to the latest papers, and you group them according to the themes or area. Okay. And then you might want, once you have the themes already, then you might want to break them down into major discussions. Okay, from those themes. So you can think about your mind map can consist of based on this kind of organized information. So mind mapping tools, there's a lot of tools that you can use. I mean, basic ideas, usually the cheapest ideas is actually to use pen and paper. So you jot down your ideas, you start drawings, you move your ideas around, and then you try to identify the link. You draw the link between these ideas and these ideas together. So you circle it up, and then you create the notes, and then you start swapping, and you start swap between your diagrams and outline as well. So you might have you might outline a few points as well. Then you might want to swap between it. But besides using pen and papers, there's also tools that allow you to do that. But again, as I said, these tools is actually you need to pay for it. Okay. So this is some of the examples, tools that actually commonly people use for research. So if you think about it, Lucid Chart is a visual workspace that combines diagrams, data visualizations, and collaborations to help you to accelerate understanding and to drive innovations. Okay. And MindMaster is basically an online mind mapping tools that help you to capture and develop and share ideas visually. Okay, and so on. So the other things that besides drawing these diagrams, you can also use some other approach. I mean, there's also some standard framework that people have done called the Prisma approach, a flow diagram, which is actually known as a preferred reporting items for systematic reviews and meta-analysis. Okay. It's a visual representative of a flow of records from different phases of systematic reviews. So you can actually have papers talking about different publications. Then you can say, you can basically draw it in this kind of methods as well. Okay. But to me, my favorite is still just use basic pen and papers, draw it big, and then you can keep on expanding it any way you want. Okay. But you can also use other tools, for example, Excel. People also, instead of drawing on paper, once you draw this out, you can always put it in your Excel file as well. Okay. Create the dates of the paper you read, what are the main ideas, who is the authors, and so on. Okay, and you can link it accordingly. Okay. And this is another example of mind maps that you can do as well. Okay, so you can actually have a self-driving car. So you say when you write your self-driving cars, so you actually draw out how you're going to formulate your reports. So you have your introductions, so you have your key questions, which actually relevant to this, and then you can have your references within it. Okay, so you can actually put each of the papers according to the area that you're discussing here. So after that, you can start writing your stories. Okay, once you have come up with your whole pictures, you have drawn your pictures, then you can start writing. Okay, so how to write? Then to start off, what you do, you start off with an overview. Okay, you have your pictures, now you start with your overviews. Then you need to decide on organizing the principles, i.e. the themes the trend, the methodology, the chronologies, the controversies, okay? And usually it can be a combination of anything, okay? So which means when you write a literature review, you can base on the recent work or the oldest work of the recent work to the previous work, or based on themes or anyhow that you want, okay? But usually you base on, so it depends how you do it. So it depends what sort of research you're trying to do. And then after that, you can actually, especially if you write a chapters literature review, you might want to use heading as well, okay, for different areas. Okay, so when you talk about AI, you might say, okay, talk about neural network. So you have this type of neural network, and each of these type has been used for pattern recognitions. So your heading can be pattern recognitions, object detections, and so on. Okay. And then after that, you can actually once you have your headings, okay, and once you have your heading done, you can actually provide a summative signpost, where this is where your argument is leading to. Okay, the signpost will show where your argument is going. Okay, and then after that, once you have all these signposts done, then you can actually summarize your review and highlight the gaps in the research. Okay, and you summarize your reviews basically. So it is quite important when you're writing, you need to be specific. Okay. In other words, when you write, you need to be very clear. Your introductions need to be clear. Okay. The overview of the topics, the aim of the review, the structure has to be very clearly written. The paragraph has to be very structured. Okay. You don't want the paragraph jumping here and there. Okay, your story, because you're writing a story basically. Okay, I'm talking about writing your story. You don't go and write literature review, say, okay, I read this paper, I put this one here, and then this is the next paper, this is the next paper. No, you make sure it's structured properly. Okay. And then the sentence is understandable and very specific. And most importantly, don't assume knowledge. Okay. And then make sure that all the key terminologies and difficult ideas are actually explained and defined clearly. Okay. How you make sure it's explained clearly. Read it again. Ask yourself, what you've written, does it make sense? Okay. Or whatever you explain in the ideas, does it make sense? Okay. And then the other thing is you might want to explain the idea, right? Okay. And then be objective and balanced. Okay. You shouldn't be biased, as I say, one of the important things. And then the last one, you use signposts to orient the reader. What this means is you need to make sure that everything is flow. Okay. So basically, when you create a signpost, you need to where appropriate, you need to show the beginning of the sections and the paragraph with the statements of which synthesize or analyze rather than just describe. Okay. So not like just say, oh, this paper do this. You need to make sure that you actually have some sort of a statements of synthesizing, of analyzing. And then you also need to you can actually use signposts to words. You can use signposting words to actually to demonstrate how texts are related to one another as well. Okay. And also what you think of them. So for example, some of the terms that you might want to use signpost, some of the signpost words, for example, is like however, yet, moreover, indeed, similarly. Okay. So you want to demonstrate the relationship between text. So this kind of text words, like however, XYZ uses these methods, or XYZ have proven this method is not really that good, for example. So you actually show some relationship between the previous work and the other work. Okay. And then the most important thing is highlight your directions. Okay. Signposts can help you to highlight your directions. So when you're writing your plot, i.e. when you're trying to write your literature review, it's important to make sure your literature review is structured. Okay. The sentences itself are within a certain topic, the same topic. Okay. Also discussion of the topic and the clauses of sentence. Okay. So for example, one paragraph itself need to be having these three things as well. Okay. It should be based on a particular topic. There's a discussion of the topic, and then there's a way you have to close the topic itself. Okay. And then you need to link the structure as well. This is important. I mean, I usually like to ask my students to do that. Make sure whatever you write between the paragraph, make sure that there's a continuity between the previous paragraph and the next paragraph. Okay. If there's no continuity, easy. create a new subheading, okay, which means you're talking about something new, okay. So basically, the logical progressions of one paragraph to another paragraph is important, because, so in other words, how you do that, you need to demonstrate some link in your language as well, okay, and then show the trend. You need to show there's a trend in that research. I mean, how the flow of the sentence is. So there's a few collaborating tools that you can actually use to do this. So there's, I mean, usually what you do, you can actually use the online tools. You can use the Microsoft Online. Why you need a collaboration tools? Because sometimes you might have two collaborators doing the same research. You have two researchers doing the same research. So you want to make sure that one people are actually editing the research, I mean the work at one time, the writing tool at one time. Okay. So there's some writing tools that allow several authors to simultaneously work on the same document. For example, Google Doc. I think Google Doc is quite commonly used by people compared to Microsoft Online, okay, because Google Doc is free. However, there's an issue with the citation manager, okay, so you might need additional citation management tools to help you with it. The other one is the Otera. Okay, Otera is a writing tools that help you, that make specifically for researcher. Okay, so which means that anything that you are interested, that you actually relevance to research, i.e. referencing, editing, formatting, according to the general requirements, are actually built within it. And the last one, I think most commonly used as a big group, is Wikipedia. So you should actually usually researcher will create a wiki page, and you'll start writing on that wiki page. Okay. So the other important things in writing is your citations. Okay. So method of, I mean, citation is very important in your research reviews. That's where you actually use it to show your evidence. So basically, what you're trying to use citation to show that whatever you written is not your, I mean, it's not your work, but somebody's work, and you use that somebody work to as evidence to show your work, to show the relevancy of your work. Okay. So there's two types of citations that commonly used. I think most of you have used citations before. So one is the integral citations, where you actually say, author 2001 argues that convolutional neural networks can work very well to detect facial recognitions, for example. It can be used to detect facial recognition. Okay. The other approach is non-integral, where the author's names actually appears outside the sentence. What this means is you just write a sentence and you put the reference behind it. Okay. But usually I like to write references saying that XYZ stated that, okay, because this clearly let the reader know that, okay, this is the work of this person, especially if that person is one of the pioneers. So you have to highlight that, okay, this work was done by these good authors. Okay. So the other thing you might want to think about it is that citation is actually also, you need to identify when and how to use the citations. Okay. So in other words, it's like, yeah, you want to know, should I cite this or not? Okay. If I'm going to cite, how am I going to cite this? So which means there's two methods you can do citations, right? How and how, right? How is either you can use the integral or non-integral. But you might want to ask a question: is it necessary for me to do? Is it necessary for me to cite it? Is this sentence need to be cited? Okay, and this is a challenge. So this is another topic that you can actually go through yourself. Okay, which sentences, which articles, or what information I write I need to cite. Okay, and the other thing, citation also help you to identify the strength, as well as you also need to decide on the citation style. Okay. So there's a few citation manager tools that you can use during your writings. I think most of you have seen most of it. Okay, for example, like EndNotes. I think you have used, some of you might have used EndNotes. Some of you might have used Mendeley. Okay. So what this citation management tools actually allow you to import citations from database, website, and catalogs. Okay. It also help you to organize the citations using folder and tags. So in other words, you can group all the citation, all the paper accordingly. Okay, and give some titles or some subheading or some text on that particular group of papers. So which means this is a way to help you to manage, to organize your reading. Okay, so you can also attach some of the management tools with your actual PDF, the actual papers, or you can actually screenshot that particular sections of the papers and put into your management tools. Okay, so you can also annotate your citations, basically give comments. So now instead of using a mind map, you can actually translate everything on your mind maps, whatever your comments, your criticality, you can put inside the Mendeley. Okay, we use Mendeley. And then some of the tools also allows you to do automated format bibliography, okay, and in text citations. But you have to be careful of this because I got a student say, "Sir, why you say my citation is wrong?" This kind of tools usually can only do up to a certain level. Okay. So for example, when you want to do in-text citation, yes, they can do in-text citations. But what they can do, they can only do a non-integral citations. Okay, integral one, you still need to state the name of the authors. Okay, so for example, XYZ stated that. So, but when you do XYZ, the bracket part, they can do it. Okay, the citation management tool can do it, but they cannot write the name of the authors down for you correctly. Okay, they cannot write it correctly. Huh? Remember that. So you need to double check that you actually write. So you know that EndNotes, okay, it's not free. Okay, the same can as RefWorks. Okay, so EndNotes, as you know, is usually used together with Microsoft Word. It's not free. It's a desktop. Will usually come with a desktop originally, but now it have a web support that allows you to do syncing and sharing of the document or the citation that you have. Okay. You can identify fields and require comparisons. RefWorks is only web only. It doesn't allow you to install on desktop. So another you need to be online to be able to use it. And the document it can support is basically Words and Words doc. The other two is basically free, okay, but come with a limitations of 300 megabytes for Zotero, and Mendeley is 2 gigabytes. So this is the two tools that you can use, and Zotero itself is quite good as well, okay, because it can actually support even Google Doc. But most commonly, students prefer to use Mendeley. But to me, either of these two is good enough for you to organize your citations, okay. The other thing that you want to do is when you start your writing, you need to make sure that you need to check you didn't copy and paste on it. This is quite common, so make sure. And then you might want to remove any irrelevant quotes. I know people like to put quotations because they find difficulty to rewrite the statement, so just put quotes, but it's not a good idea to include always quotes. Okay. And then you don't want to use quotation as introduction as well. Okay. These are a few things that you want to do when you check your references, when you want to use your reference. Another word, limit quotations as a reference in your work if you can. Okay. And check for plagiarism. Well, there's some online tools you can use, but most of it you need to pay as well. So usually it's good practice to submit in your documents to online checking tools. But I think most universities provide this kind of tools for you to use. And then once you have finished writing, now the next thing is finalizing and reviewing your story. Okay. So when you review your story or your literature review, first thing is you want to do some editing and proofreading. Okay. So editing, you need to re-edit it. The process of continuing, revising, and improving it. I know when you write your thesis, you can keep on reading it. You're never satisfied with it, or even maybe you're satisfied with it, and you can't spot any more errors because you're so used to it. You keep on reading it, you can't find the errors anymore. So another way is you might want someone else to proofread it for you. Okay, you might want to give it to someone to read for you so that they can actually identify the errors. It's quite common to me. I can write a set paragraph and they don't find any errors. But the moment I pass it to someone to read it, they will ask me, what does this sentence mean? Okay, thank you for that. So I'll correct it accordingly. So it's good to ask people to read for you. Okay, but obviously you don't give them to read when you haven't even checked you haven't do your editing first, because people will get frustrated and they end up don't want to read anymore. Okay, so so the first thing you need to do when you do your re-editing, first thing, check your spelling. Your language, your spelling. So Microsoft Word is good in it. You have a spell check and a grammatic check. But I don't like Microsoft Word because I prefer to use LaTeX because it's much more prettier when you produce the final documents. But LaTeX only provide you with spell check. So there's some online tools that you can actually put onto that you can actually use. But this online tools only allows you to do for words. Okay, that can actually check your grammar correctly. So This Grammarly tools actually improve readability as well, help you to, so that the sentence actually flow. Microsoft Word, you check for grammar, but sometimes it doesn't solve the meaning of the sentence. So you have to be careful as well. Okay, so there's a limitation with Microsoft Word as well. Another way you can actually ask someone to read your documents. Another way you can pay someone to do it, get a proofreader, a professional proofreader to read your final thesis and pair them. Okay. So when you do a research review itself is basically an evolutional process. It is not something that you do now and you can forget about it. Okay, you can forget about it when you don't want to do that research anymore. But if you're still going to do the research, you can't just read it now and you forget about it. Because what happens is you never know that one day you do something, say, I've read this somewhere, where is it? So you cannot find it. So it's a continuous process. The reason why it is continuous process because the field of research that you are doing are constantly evolving and changing. People keep on doing the same research as you are, so the field itself keeps changing. Okay, usually keep on improving, so it's usually very dynamic. Okay, so the other things that you do in your research review is you do the data collections. Okay, so you're trying to identify the questions in your stories, identify what is missing in your stories. Okay, so basically you're trying to read your own stories now. And then also you want to identify tools that can help you to move forward as well. Okay. And then once you re-edit yourself, you might want to see as well, you might want to find tools that from people work. Okay. Also publications in good journals and some of the technical documents. So basically you're trying to learn from others as you write you review your writing. Okay. So finally you close your storyboard. Okay, once you review, you close it. So you do your final check-in. When you do close your, so you read back and you see, read it again and say, what do you know about the immediate area now? Okay, after you do research review, what's the immediate area? Okay, what are the key arguments and key characteristics and key concept or key figures? Okay. What are the existing debates and theory? What are the common methodology used? What do researchers know about the field? What do researchers don't know? Why should we go further study on this topic? Okay, if we go further, will it contribute to any new knowledge? Okay, so this is a sort of a checklist that you need to do when you have done your read the papers to see whether you address any of these issues. So you can actually take off this paper actually tell you some of the some information about the immediate areas. It actually highlight the key arguments, also show some theories, the methods. Okay, so these are the sort of things that you want to identify when you read your papers, and you want to check that everything is in there. Okay. So the takeaway statements. What does LR supposed to be doing when you do research review? You should actually provide a big picture of your research. So when you write your research review as well, you should actually provide a big pictures of your research. Okay. So basically, you need to cover everything in your research review, from the design, from the methodology, from the testing, from the theory, all need to be written inside it. Need to be covered in your research review, not just stating paperwork. Okay, that's why research review need to be structured. And remember, only include those sources or material that can actually help you to shape your arguments. Okay. Resist the temptation to include everything that you read. I know that you want to include as much as possible because you have read so much, you have read it, why don't I include it? The answer is not necessary to, because don't forget, especially when you do a PhD, the more you put in your thesis, your final thesis for submissions, you actually allow your examiner to find more questions for you to ask. Okay, so it's important that you only include those material that are relevant to your research and that can actually help you to shape your arguments. Okay, provide only the critical evidence or the necessary evidence. Okay, don't include non-related material. No good for that, because I've experienced that. I've included a lot of, because of my thesis is about using non-standard computing approach to detect failure in the network. So I just put in a lot of different approach, which I don't even use it in, I I mean, it's relevant, but not really relevant. And I was asked that question, I can't answer it. And at the end of the day, I asked my examiner, what should I do with it? Just remove it. Okay? It's quite common. I mean, that's why I say, make sure whatever you put in is relevant. Especially you need to submit your thesis for a viva. Okay? Or else you'll be struggling yourself during the viva, you can't answer that questions. Okay? And then make sure you have a balanced summaries. Okay? I do your final check, make sure everything is, there's no bias towards your research. Okay? So balance your summary and your analysis. And then keep in mind that what is the purpose that you're writing your literature review? Okay? Why are you writing it? There should be a reason for that. When you understand the purpose of your writing your literature review, then you can actually write it in a proper story. Okay. And the last one, be careful with your citations. Okay? Citation, as I said, citations is important because you don't want to be caught plagiarizing. Okay, because it's, I mean, especially for those university, copying a work can give you a big trouble. You might actually expel from the university. Okay. So with that, I'll end my presentations. So if any questions, I'll open up I will hand this presentation back to you.
To me.
Back to you, Rennie.
Me, the moderator. So thank you so much for your presentation, Dr. Lim. I think the audience and also myself find it quite useful in, guiding as a guidance in, doing literature review and, giving it a framework of thinking on how to organize this literature review, which I think maybe most of us, and of course in the audience, has already done. But it's without any, basically it's just collecting paper, and sometimes it could feel aimless and daunting. Yeah. So in fact, we already have several questions from the audience, which I will read from for you. First is from Bambang Widyawardana Maulana. I wonder if you'd like to ask yourself, Pak Bambang. Yes.
Hello.
Thank you.
Yes. Good evening, Dr. Lim. My name is Bambang Maulana. So my question is, you mentioned about the I already informed for the paper. This is just not the paper. So you mentioned about the familiarity. So could you more explain about this?
Sorry, what do you mean by the familiarity? Can you repeat the question again? I'm trying to get the point of your question. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Let's I try to open. Yeah, in your explanation, you mentioned about the to making the paper or thesis, not just making. So it's mean should be mentioned also about the familiarity.
So how do you demonstrate familiarity?
Yes, demonstrate the familiarity in the papers.
Yeah.
Could you make more some real example about this?
Okay, because I think okay, how you can actually show that you are actually familiar with your research area. I know to say the papers, because when you write papers, the purpose is, I mean, when you write a research review, you want to show the reader that you actually familiarize with the area, right? That's the main. I think that's what your question is. How you can actually do that. So I think what you can do there is actually you need to first try to be specific about what you're trying to show people that you're familiar with first. Okay, for example, when you talk about AI, okay, so you want to show that you're actually familiarized with all the AI algorithms. Okay, or you maybe familiarize with you want to show people that you know there are different type of AI algorithms, but what you're interested is actually in convolutional neural networks. So you want to when you do your research review, you need to show that okay, there's a lot of different convolutional neural network use in the area that you are really interested in. Okay, so you can say, okay, this has been applied in this, in the problem that you're trying to solve. So you can say convolutional neural network has been used in A, has been used in, and A has used it in X, B has used it in X, C has used it in X, D has used it in X. Okay, using the same convolutional neural network. So in other words, when people read your literature review, they know, okay, this person actually quite familiar, quite knowledgeable about this area, because in his literature review, you actually show that you are actually covering major of the current work, not just any work, but you actually highlight that you actually know that, oh, this is the current work that you actually do. So I think that's why when you write your, I don't know what did you answer your question or not, but what I say is, so it's quite important that when you write, you theme your writing accordingly, okay, to the theme or the area that you're trying to solve in. You make sure the topic is grouped according to the area that you're trying to solve in, and make sure that if that particular topic is very important in your research, so make sure that you have a number of paper, not just one paper. Okay, by doing that and showing that you actually know about the latest approach. Okay, when I mean latest, maybe current and maybe over the last 5 years, then that is good enough to show the readers that you actually familiarize with the area of the research that you're looking into, and actually provide much more concrete and justifications for you why there's a need for you to do research in that area. I don't know whether that answers your question or not.
Yeah, okay. I can catch your point. Thanks a lot, Dr. Lim.
Okay.
And also maybe by like being able to relate our own work with this other researchers' work, maybe that would help too. Yeah.
You can do that, but when you write literature review, you don't usually relate your work.
Oh, okay. Oh, yes.
but again, what you highlight is good, because what happens is, what you're trying to say here is actually literature review not only about chapter in literature review chapter, is actually also in your results. So you can actually do referencing in your results. Right? So the literature review that you've done is actually useful to support your results.
Okay.
So citation not just occur at a particular chapter, it actually occurs everywhere.
Yes. Okay. So thank you for your answer. And we have a second question. So it was asked by Mr. Amrin Fariki. Maybe you'd like to ask Dr. Lim yourself. I think it would be like a great opportunity for us to be able to interact with the speaker. Yeah, so maybe I can help to read the question. Is so sorry. Yes. So the question is first, how to find problem statement quickly, and secondly, which one comes first between empirical problem and literature review or research opportunities in research background?
Can you repeat the last sentence?
Yes.
Which one comes?
So which one should come first between empirical problem and literature review or research opportunities in when we write a research background?
Okay.
So should it be like should we maybe emphasize an empirical problem, or what has been done before?
Okay, so this is a very interesting question. Which one comes first? Whether you come up with your research questions first, or you come up with your problem statement first.
Yes.
The thing is, obviously, when you can't even, to me, my answer to that is you always come up with your problem statement first. The reason why is because when you have your empirical problems, you try to identify your empirical problems first, or you try to identify your problem statement first. That's where you start. Look for your literature to see whether there's any problem with that area or not.
Mm-hmm.
So once you identify if there's an area, i.e., there's a weaknesses in the current research in that area, then you can actually come up with the research questions.
Oh, okay. Okay, so maybe first we give a statement of what underlies what it is we're trying to do. Maybe i.e. the empirical problem, let's say, and then we relay that to existing solutions, and then we can state our research yes. question.
Because usually research question is very specific, and you can't create the research questions until you have actually identified there's a problem. And that's why when you come with research, even when you come with problem statements, that problem statements might not need to be solved after you do your literature survey.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. It is possible that we find a solution.
Yeah. So that's why literature review should be, when you do literature review, we usually do make sure you do a very comprehensive literature review. Okay. Because, for example, let's say you have a problem trying to use AI to solve, I don't know what, to detect disease, to detect COVID-19, let's say, based on what certain data that you have. So you say, okay, since you say COVID-19 is new, so yeah, we can do that. Then you realize when you try to find the papers, and when you try to read the papers, try to understand more about COVID-19, there's nothing much I can do. So there's no, you find out that maybe there's nothing much, or someone else has been doing, because now COVID-19, everyone is doing it. So you realize that problem has been solved. So which means I can't formulate any research questions. So research questions usually come after you formulate your problems, then you do your literature review. I mean, not a comprehensive, but at least you do a few literature review first. That's why when you write your problem statements, usually you have already read the papers already. To support your research questions.
Oh yes. Okay, thank you. I find it quite interesting. So, how do we distinguish between a problem that is actually solved and whether there is actually an opportunity for us for research? Because what I find is it is quite easy to to get carried away and feel that, well, everybody has answered everything. So how would you say we could avoid such traps?
Yeah, I think what you're trying to say is we are born in the wrong year. Everything has been solved, which is true. Okay? If you're born 50 years ago, I can discover a lot of new things. Not everything has been solved. Yeah, okay. Which is good. Which is a good thing. That's why usually what you should do when you're trying to identify the area of research that you're trying to do, not about research questions here, but it's about area of research that you're trying to do. Try to look at the area where not a lot of people is doing it.
Oh, okay. Oh, a great tip. Okay.
Yeah, because what happens is if you do a research where very popular, everyone is doing, there's a few danger of it. Okay, especially for PhD, because one, you might be doing it, other people is also doing it because it's so popular. There's a lot of people doing it, and people might publish before you, and you can't use your idea anymore.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because
interesting.
They already use your idea. So that's why the thing is it's quite important that you find a research that is not very popular, but don't go to something don't go to something that no one is doing also, because that you end up a trouble as well. So you need to be that's why all the literature review is important, all the reading is important. At least you can group it together.
Okay. Okay, so I think thank you for the tip. I think it makes great sense, because once something is popular, it means that maybe people has already worked on it for some time, and in an area that's not so popular, it could be popular. Maybe it will be popularized by us. So yeah, I think that's a very sound advice, and yeah, I think thank you.
But the thing is, if you do something that is popular, the chances of you discovering something is also more, because you know that people is doing it and you find some limitation on their work.
Oh, okay.
But
okay.
if you find some limitation on their work, people also can find limitation on their work. That's why it's more like you're racing against each other. See who is the one trying to identify gaps in the current work. So if someone else find it first before you find it, then yeah, that's all. Which means you're wasting your time.
Okay.
Like, so yeah.
Okay.
That's a challenge. That's one of the challenges that you think about it.
So yeah, maybe like a balance.
Yes.
Between the two would be yes. So thank you for that. And we have another questions from Dr. Irfansyah. Thank you. So as you know, we teach in countries in which the native language is not English. So what are your tips for non-English speakers, like most Indonesian students, to read the papers from their research results in order to get the main ideas and organize the papers? So it might be like a very daunting task for our students. So do you have any tips on effective reading?
I think, I mean, okay, let's say if you have difficulty in understanding, I think the most important thing is trying to find the keywords first.
Okay.
Because as you know that you can do religious search, right? You do religious search, you can find a lot of literature, and you can go and read every single religion, but you don't understand it. Okay, but if you identify the keywords already, then you can actually filter out those articles and then go into and then try to read individually. At least you can reduce the number of papers that you need to read. Okay, those things. So once you use keywords, which means keywords, in other words, you need to understand the keywords that you need to identify the keywords that you want to look for. Okay, first thing you need to identify the keywords.
Oh, okay.
Right. For example, like, I mean, I don't know, because like keywords like you are interested in optimizations, you still need to understand what is optimization first means. Okay, for some students. Then you need to know about convolution neural networks, algorithms, all these kind of terms you need to know. Then after that, you can search through those keywords. Then you read the paper, see how many, I mean, one way is to see how commonly that keywords is used, because you don't understand what it means, right? I would say you don't understand what the paper means actually yet. So you identify the keywords. Then after that, then you try to read. I mean, the only way is you try to read the paper no matter what.
Oh, okay. Okay. That is interesting. So suppose that, so I imagine, like the first step that people do, of course, to use keywords for their search. So with that, maybe they will find, like a more general set of papers. And then from that, I think they should identify what are the, other common keywords there, which might, like help the students in identifying the topics within each paper that came from the more general keywords that they previously used. So it's interesting that actually it emphasized that, like what are the like the key topics which is described by the keywords in this paper.
Yeah, because I'm just like this particular slide here say, which means if you don't understand you have problem with understanding English, so you need to be selective.
Yeah.
So the first thing is try to identify the keywords, because which means you don't, I mean, this is for someone who have a lot of papers to read, but if you don't understand it, which means you don't have to read everything, but identify the keywords first. Okay. If the keywords is useful to, if that paper is useful to you, then maybe read a particular sentences, a particular paragraph that is relevant to you. Okay, which means you don't have to read every single paper, but just, I mean, every single page of paper, but only read the chapter or the sections that is relevant to you. Okay. But once you identify the sections that is relevant to you, but you cannot get away with the last one, you still have to understand what is his writing. That one you can't run away. So the only way you can do that is actually go do some Google, use the Google Translate and translate a particular paragraph, I would say.
Yeah. Okay.
At least that will save your time to have to go through every single papers.
So no need
the
to
whole papers. Yeah.
So no need to read the entire thing, but you must know what is the most important keywords, and then from that keyword, maybe go to the sections that might be more most relevant to.
Yes, because it's relevant to you. If it's relevant to your work, then you can cite it. Yes, correct.
Okay. Thank you. And we have okay. So maybe are there any questions from the audience? So it seems that people are interested in the materials. Yes, of course, it did. Yes, it has. I find that it has lots of tips that are very useful. And we have another question here from the audience. Again, I'm sorry. Yes. Okay, this one is from Fahmi Mubarak. Which part of journal papers would you say is the most important to take or to paraphrase as part of our literature review?
Okay, I would say depends what you're trying to look for. Because when I say when you do a literature review, right? So usually are you looking for methodology?
Oh, okay.
Are you looking for theory? Are you looking for testing approach? Okay, and so on. So if you're looking for testing approach, you might want to paraphrase their results. Okay, you might say, okay, their result shows that using these methods can give 90% accuracy or something, for example. So which means you actually, the reason why you do that is because you might be using their same approach as well, testing methodology. So for example, they have this particular statistical tools that they use or they develop. So you say, okay, I'm going to apply this particular, I'm going to use these research tools proposed by XYZ because their paper have shown that the papers, their work, their result have shown that using their methods can improve the accuracy by 20% or whatever percent. So it depends what you're trying to do.
Okay, so actually it depends, and maybe the more important question is actually, to formulate or to define what it is that we are trying to do, instead of just collecting all these papers and being overwhelmed. It is very important to be able to formulate what we are trying to do.
Yeah,
right.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. When you do your literature review, you group them together. You group them accordingly. So maybe you have found a group of paper that actually talking about methodology. You found a group of paper that actually talk about testing. Okay. So when you reference it, you say, okay, I'm using this method to test. This paper is using this method to test. So you're going to reference that piece of papers when you talk about your testing, and you're going to reference that testing approach, their result or something.
Oh, okay. That's a great tip, I think. And yes, I think I would like to again open the floor. Maybe the students would like to ask. So, okay, I think that's all of the questions that we have for today. However, I do have a question for you, as as a fellow educators, and also with someone with more experience in doing literature review and research. So in this presentation, you have given us a lot of tips and ways of thinking that is useful in guiding a literature review. But what would you say is like the most important thing to remember that would improve the quality of literature review of most of the students? Which is to say that maybe somebody with not that much of experience in like maybe recognizing which papers are relevant and things like that. What is like the most frequent mistake that people do in this matter?
I think personally, if you ask me, I would like to see my students, if they're going to produce a literature review, make sure it is actually structured and is in a story.
Oh, okay.
That's why I always say write a storyboard. So which means when you write, which means it doesn't matter what you're trying to cover, what topic, what themes, what topic you're trying to cover, whether it's a testing approach. Make sure that every literature that you read, there's a connections between them. Okay? Because what I usually find students they like to write is big and they usually have all the literature is here and there. Like they read this paper,
all over the place.
Yeah, all over the places. And I mean this is quite commonly done by students. I think they can identify what to write, but the only issue, I mean, identifying what to write is easy, but the only issue usually most students have is actually to make sure that everything is flow. Because what happens is to do that, you need to know how to use all the connecting signposts. Okay, I call it signposts, basically the connecting words.
Okay.
Because when I mean continuity, not just within the sentence, but also from one paragraph to the next paragraph, from the next paragraph to the next paragraph, and then from this heading sections to the next sections, I usually like to ask students to have some continuity. At least when you read, there's a story flow between the previous sections and the next section. I mean that is the most difficult challenge to write when you write a literature review.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, so I think that's a very like interesting answer to that question, and I think quite unexpected, but I think it would answer students usually collect these papers and make summaries, but these are not related. People cannot see what are the connection between this and that. Maybe with more experience, we would do that naturally. But I think maybe by writing a storyboard or creating a storyboard would be an excellent way to accelerate the students in adopting this way of thinking that the literature should be should tell a story, which would then help them in doing their own research. So yeah.
Because what happens when you write your storyboard, basically you're trying to show that whatever you read, the literature that you read is all relevance. There's a relevancy between this paper and the next. I mean, not paper. There's a relevancy between this topic and the next topic and the topic that you have been reading. So because the first thing you usually identify the area that you want to do research in and the key area. But once you identify the area, then when you start writing, if there's a story flow, then which means everything you've written down there is related.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay, so thank you, Dr. Lim. And also I'd like to thank you for your presentation and the very useful tips that you have given us and the opportunity to interact with you in how to create a good literature review. So thanks again, and I will be handing over the session to the MC.
Thank you very much, Rani Kusumwardani, for assisting this amazing session. And also thank you very much for Dr. Tionghu Lim for the excellent lecture and Q&A session today. So please everyone give applause to our speaker and moderator by using the Zoom reaction feature for today's amazing session. And then I would like to present a certificate awarding for our honorable speaker and moderator. So the first one, this is the certificate presented for Dr. Tiong Ho Lim as our speaker today. Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Lim, for being our speaker today. And also, this is the certificate presented for Burani Kusumawardani as our moderator today. Thank you very much, Burani. Okay, so once again, thank you very much, our speaker and also moderator, for your availability on today's session. So now we are almost reached the end of the session, but before that, I would like to invite all participants as well as the honorable speaker and moderator to join the photo session. So please everyone, open your camera now and show off your smile. So I see there are around 3 slides here. So please keep striking your pose until the photo session has ended, because we still didn't know which slides are you on. So I will start the photo session. So strike your pose. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so for the next slide. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so the last slide. 1, 2, 3. Okay, we've done the group photo session. So thank you very much, everyone. And for the participants, please fill the feedback form through the link that you can see on the Zoom chat box as well that has been sent by the committee. And we want to remind you that the participant who will get the stamp for it is a participant who come on time, join this event until the end, and fill the feedback form. And finally, we have reached the end of today's Researcher and Research Student Enrichment Program, and we sincerely apologize for any mistakes we may have made in presenting as Master of Ceremony and Committee. Thank you very much, our speaker, moderator, and participants for the attention and cooperation. And before we part, I would like to inform you that we still have several future agendas for R2SEP in software engineering stream. You can see it on the poster we will show you right now. Okay, Laura, can you share it? Okay, so you can see it on the poster we are showing you right now, or you can check it out on ITS Global Engagement website later on. We will see you in the next session on 21st of October 2021. And once again, thank you very much everyone for today. Good evening. And wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much.
Waalaikumsalam.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you, Professor Lim.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you,
Lim.
Dr.
And
Lim.
Thank you.
Reni.
Thank you. Allow me to end the session in
Thank you, Mbak Intan, Mbak.
3,